This is Paul David Thompson, and you're listening to the SME Stories podcast.
You are now listening to the next great small business podcast. Welcome to the SME Stories podcast, where it is all about small businesses in Canada. And here's your host, Ken Alfred.
Hey everybody, we got a great episode today with Paul David Thompson of Windcore Invest. Now a little bit about Paul himself. He is actually a #1 best-selling author, real estate investor, providing investing insights for real estate. Now a little bit about Paul himself. Now, he has 17 years of experience in the technology and information system industry. During that time, he worked for 4 Fortune 500 companies as a computer engineer, staff manager, and director of engineering. In 2017, he retired from corporate America to focus all of his attention on real estate investments. He's been involved in actually over 500 real estate transactions. Now, he enjoys applying the experience he got from corporate environment towards the real estate investment business that he has right now. In terms of education, he actually comes in with an engineering and business management background. He enjoys creating value by using the discipline of an engineer while combating effective leadership to build a strong team and streamline business processes. Now, he's been on a bunch of different real estate podcasts, and he actually owns his own podcast called the Ready Investor One, where they teach mindset and mechanics of real estate investing. He also manages a real estate mastermind community called My Freedom Foundry, where he helps investors forge their personal and financial freedom. In addition to owning his own rental properties, his current real estate business practice includes hard money lending and a newly founded land development company in Texas. Now, he's lived in Little Rock, Arkansas for 22 years, happily married since 2005 with 2 children, and he spends most of the time out of his home office managing his business portfolio. So we're going to be focusing on the real estate investment side again today, and I think Paul is going to have a great story, so sit back and absorb. All right, guys, we have Paul Thompson. Hello, Paul. How are you?
Man, I'm great. Kind of like you said, I'm cold. We're recording this in January, and it's
Yes.
I think over in all of North America is cold right now. So like I think everybody feels their pain.
Yeah, exactly. And I was telling him I had my little Fahrenheit to Celsius calculator here, and here in Ajax, Ontario, Canada is minus 12 degrees Celsius, which is 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And Paul, where are you located? Are you in?
I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I think today is 17 degrees. Both of my kids are out of school because we have 2 inches of snow, which of course shuts the South down. We can't handle it.
Wow. Well, it's just cold here. But for some reason, it's flurries here. I think the kids are a little disappointed that they don't get a snow day,
Right?
which is unfortunate because I think in Canada here, we always get the 4 seasons. Like I think in Arkansas, they also get the 4 seasons as well. But we just got a green Christmas, which kind of disappointed the kids. Because if it was up to me, Paul, I would say I want there to be a big dump of snow on the 23rd of December, melt by Boxing Day, so I can use my snowblower at least once or twice, and then I'm good. I'm good, right?
So I didn't realize in Canada, do you guys celebrate Boxing Day? I thought that was a British thing.
No, we do. Boxing Day is a big thing here. And although lately, over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, almost every time you're watching an advertisement, there's a Boxing Week sale. Even though it's like the middle
they're trying to extend it.
They've extended. They've had Black Friday sales. They've had Boxing Year sales. So and it's not what it used to be, because I think with the expansion of online shopping, I think it's somewhat harder now, because before sometimes we see some of those videos in the States where people are like literally, pushing each other through to get the Black Friday or Boxing Day stuff. We don't really get that much in Canada. Maybe unless there's like a very a U.S. brand that's never been in Canada before,
right?
And they're now opening up a location that might be like that. But the stores that I go to, there's never a huge lineup like Home Depot. You're never going to see crazy people going through those things.
No, they've definitely done a good job of spreading that out, I think, because I mean there were real issues in the U.S. a couple years ago where people were getting trampled. And so which is horrible. They've, I think, done a better job of kind of policing the people, and with, like you say, e-com, it isn't quite the urge of getting out there on Friday, for us, Friday morning, the day after Thanksgiving, it's kind of like the big shopping day in the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, Paul Thompson, what's your story?
So I was a corporate drone. So I'm a engineer I was raised in kind of a lower income family, never went without, but, really had to scrimp to get by and make it to college and pay for college. And getting a college degree was a way for me to not be broke. And so once I got a professional job, I remember having this kind of weird sensation of, okay, like my life's goal at 22 is now complete. I have now gotten a professional job that pays me a decent salary as an engineer, but like I was not into my job at all. And it took me 6 months of kind of working through that before I kind of settled in to realize the fact that, okay, this is what I'm doing now, and I need to kind of find my way into work. And I did for a while. And for 15 solid years, I was a corporate drone, worked my way up the corporate ladder. But I always had this kind of idea in the back of my mind that one day I would go out and do something on my own. I would start some sort of business, do a side hustle, something. And I just never did. I just kind of fantasized and dreamed about it. And I had a kind of this wake up call moment where I was on a beach vacation, and I had a chance to extend my vacation because the place we were staying became available all of a sudden. And everything in my life was set up so that I could stay. My wife was a stay-home mom. We had the money. My kids were both out of school because it was summertime, and the beach just came open to us. Like they were going to offer it to us at half the price. Like perfect. I worked in the kind of telecommunications computer space, so like we made the very technology that makes this streaming like this possible, right? But I called my boss up and say, I'm just going to work from this beach next week, and I'll work as usual. And this is pre-pandemic. I'll work as usual. All the people that report to me don't work in my office anyway. But my boss said, "Oh no, we don't do that here." And it's like what are you talking about? I expect your tail to be back in the office at 8:00 at 8 a.m. sharp. Click.
And what year was this?
This was in 2015.
Okay.
So the technology was possible. Like this was not a stretch, but it just wasn't part of the cultural phenomena yet. It was pre-pandemic, and I would just like, what else was I to do but just kind of tuck my tail between the legs and go back to work? But I was pissed, and that was the kind of wake up call moment that realized that I just really wasn't important to that company as I thought I was, and I could very much just be laid off at any moment. I was a single income family, and I was vulnerable. And it was time for me to create an alternative way of earning an income. And that's when I went out searching for a different way to to build my own business so that I wasn't relying on this corporate machine that really didn't care about me as a cog.
Right. And I'll say this story really quickly. I remember a few years ago when I was also working, I remember the one time, like I was in the office, everyone, all the cubicles are around, and, I think it was right near the end of the day that I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to browse social media just finally for I was a good little boy for the entire day.
Right.
I go in, I just log into Facebook really quickly. Then next, the VP of corporate real estate happens to walk by me behind me. And he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Hey," and I'm thinking,
busted.
Seriously? The one time I decide to try and, browse, that's when the vice president happens to walk by. So anyway, so you had this epiphany. So
right.
Then how did you actually come up with, out of all the things you thought about, what settled on, like, I guess, real estate, right? Because that's kind of what your bread and butter at the time, right?
That is what I landed on. And I'm not religious about any certain sort of asset class or business. Like you find the business that makes sense for you and your personality and the product and the market that in the cycle that we're in, right? And I was like, so what could I do where I could still work my job for a while, but then kind of ease my way into this other business? And I discovered that anything else I looked into was just, I was going to be buying myself another job. I was so afraid of that. I thought about getting into a franchise. I thought about getting into some sort of like an insurance agent or something, being a real estate agent, which I had been briefly before. But I thought, I feel like I would just be jumping from the frying pan right into the fire with no security blanket whatsoever, and no certainty to the outcome. I thought, well, what if I just bought some rental properties and let's just see if that makes sense. And so I bought a single family property in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I live. And I did what they call the BRRRR method, where you buy the property, get it fixed up, rent it out, and then refinance to get most, if not all, your money back. And so I started off with like 50 grand. I didn't have much money just to start with, but I was able to put a down payment and do some rehab to a property with a loan, and then refi it and get nearly all my money back, and the thing rented. And it rented for enough to cover my expenses, plus my mortgage, plus a little bit of cash flow. I thought, well, that's a good proof of concept. That worked. I was able to do that like in 6 weeks. And then I just like turned on the gas, and I bought one of those on average every month for the next 2 years, and just built my portfolio of single family properties doing that. And that was enough to give me the confidence that I could create a plan and kind of a roadmap to escaping my day job.
Wow. And then that's very interesting, right? Because like you talked about, like you were buying, right away, like almost every single month and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like where were you getting your funding from? Like, were you going to credit unions or going to banks or loan? Like, because I don't know if it's like that in the States anymore. I could have sworn that there was like a limit of how many loans at time you can currently get.
Right. So in the U.S., and this may be applied in Canada as well, but if you have a government-backed loans, like in our case, we call it Fannie and Freddie Mac, those loans, you can only qualify for so much. But then you have this whole universe of loans that are just private loans that are like local commercial banks, local credit unions, and even this thing now called DSCR loans, debt service coverage ratio loans. That are private, basically bank-like entities that will lend to you. And so there's a lot of options available to real estate investors in the U.S. to buy from these institutions or buy a property that will has financing that's backed by these institutions.
Wow. So that's really interesting. Yeah. I don't know if we have like that in Canada. So maybe I'll have to try to look for a Canadian real estate investor that we can, ask if that's still the case. Cause I remember when I was into real estate many years ago, wanted to get into that approach. The only experience that my wife had at the time, Mrs. K, was, her aunt wanted to rent, like we were renting her condo, which is back from like the late 80s. So It was actually really big. If you take a look at condominiums now, they really cram everything in there. It's really tight.
Yeah.
And, I think at the time when we moved out and they were trying to rent out to someone else, my uncle-in-law would always get phone calls and all the horror stories you can imagine, to the point that that's all that my wife kind of knew. And the idea of jumping into that was something that she was like, well, I don't want you having to go and unclog a toilet and, dealing with people who don't pay. And so eventually it's like, I couldn't break her. So we ended up just investing in REITs, and we invested in solar panels. So we did something, right? Yeah. And I can still say I'm somewhat in the real estate investment profession, although it's just REITs, but hey, that whatever works.
Well, in that case, what you're doing is you're doing a passive investment, which is fine. The difference between being an active investor and a passive investor is, as an active investor, you do need to take care of some of the challenges that owning real estate has. And just like running a business, when you're an active owner of a business, there's a lot to do to make sure everything keeps spinning. And so that's an important distinction that I think a lot of people need to think about is, what are they spending their time and energy on? And are they looking to be an active investor, or are they looking to be a passive investor? It makes perfect sense to have a job or a business where you're active, you're spending all your time, but then the money that you earned and saved, you turn around and then invest passively, because then you're making your money work for you. And the idea is that you want your money to work harder than you have to work.
Exactly. So how many units do you have right now, and where are they all located?
Mm-hmm. So single family, I have about 40 single family units in Central Arkansas. And I have, I've kind of grown up in the kind of the scale of the business, and now I'm doing commercial real estate. So I don't really buy and sell a lot on the single family space anymore, but I still have that portfolio that I kind of keep as my kind of basic cash flow. But then I also have commercial real estate properties in Texas. I'm just a big fan of the Texas market. It just works really well. It's large growth. There's a lot more opportunities. And so I have fractional shares of several different apartment complexes in the Dallas and Houston markets.
Wow. And for the excited about real estate investing, and let's say they only know the residential side, whether it's 4 to 6 homes or anything like that, how big of a, when you decide to venture into the commercial space, commercial space compared to residential?
Yeah, so it's a very common question, a very reasonable question. What is the pros and cons of buying a single family residential property versus some sort of commercial real estate? And in my case, when I say commercial real estate, I'm doing anything that's I call commercial, anything that's 2 units or more, because the financing can be very similar for 4 or under, but anything 5 or above is considered, unquestionably, is considered commercial. But a duplex, you have certain ways of monetizing that, whereas with a single family, you have many, many more ways of monetizing a single family property. So that's why it's an important distinction to think about that. But in both cases, these are residential properties, meaning that we are offering housing to a consumer. And that's my specialty. There's plenty of other disciplines within commercial that I don't really get into very much, like storage or retail or office, or industrial. That's not what I do. I do multifamily. And multifamily, just apartments. And the pros and cons, and we'll talk about those pros and cons, is you can scale faster when you are buying properties. You get economies of scale when you're buying a 12 or 20 or 40 unit apartment complex as compared to 12 or 20 or 40 single family properties. It takes a long time, right, to buy that many single family properties. But what's interesting is, while it is a little bit harder to buy, say, a 40 unit apartment complex, it's not 40 times harder to buy a 40 unit than it is to buy 40 single family houses, right?
Right.
So you have to go through the same process, get the property under contract, raise the financing. It's not 40 times harder to buy a 40 unit apartment complex than it is to buy one single family house.
Yeah. And just a quick question before you get into more of that, so for your single family homes, is it just literally one tenant in there, or did you maybe also make a room in the basement or like a separate floor so you rent maybe 2 units within one residential house, or is it?
Yeah, it depends on the property. So sometimes the property is set up to where you could break it up into multiple units. With almost one or two exceptions, all of mine are just classic single family houses and what they call Class B, maybe C properties. I have 1 or 2 Class A properties. But what I also do is on 3 of the units, I rent them out through Airbnb on what I call a 30-day stay or midterm rental. So that's to traveling professionals.
I was actually going to save that for the tips from the pros segment here, where I was going to say, hey, if I have multifamilies, should I consider using some of them as Airbnb? So you did utilize those ones, which is great, actually, because I guess for some people, they don't really, especially when they think about it, if they're worried about, I don't know about finding the right tenant and, but I don't want it to go unoccupied while I'm trying to find the right tenant. Maybe Airbnb is one. Although, is there a restriction in Arkansas specifically where it's like, if you have a certain number of single family homes, that only a certain percentage of them can be deemed short term rentals like an Airbnb?
It's a really good question. So when you're talking about Airbnb, that's really the place that you do it in most cases. There are competitors like VRBO or Verbo.
Yes,
you want to call them.
Verbo, or I still don't know how to say it, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think they say it as Verbo. It just sounds dumb, but I guess I should say it since that's what they say in their commercials.
Verbo.
So there are other vacation rental type sites, and these are what we would consider short-term rentals. And short-term rentals have a lot of pros to them in that they generate a lot extra income. I do something slightly different, which is called midterm or 30-day stays. So we only offer it, our furnished property for rent for a stay of at least 30 days. And what that does is it makes us exempt from the local jurisdiction's rules on short-term rentals. So if you rent a property for at least a month, it looks and acts legally like any sort of long-term rental you've ever heard of. The only distinction is it happens to have furniture in it. So I can charge a little bit more for that for like a traveling professional, or like right now we have somebody who's like being pre-staged for all the winter weather, and they're like insurance adjusters for all the claims that are coming. And so there's traveling professionals that you can cater to, and it's a slightly different model. You still furnish it, but the kind of distinctions that you're making is you're making something that's comfortable and affordable versus something that's an experience like would do with a vacation rental. So we'll put a rice cooker in there instead of putting a really fancy coffee station.
Fruit basket. Yeah.
Right.
Fruit basket.
Like it's different, right? So you're not trying to offer them an experience for a short-term vacation stay. You're offering them a comfortable place to lay their head and, pass the time when they're not working.
Yeah, like this is your home for the next 30 days.
Exactly.
Right. So interesting. So then so you have you got 40 units there, 40 different single families. You said you also have some properties in the States. How big of a team do you have with you right now? Or is that you literally are doing everything at this point?
No. That's a great question. This really leans into, I think, the subject of your podcast and the people who are listening. Whether you're a landlord or not, that's not really the point. Your considering to be a business owner or you already are a business owner. And it's a very important distinction as to whether or not you are a business owner or are you owned by your business. And I am very, very big on being a business owner that sits in the owner's box. And there's still responsibilities, don't get me wrong, but I don't spend my time unclogging toilets. I don't spend my time doing the details. I hire these things out, right? So I run a business that has employees, and most of my employees are third-party contractors like a property management company. And it's not perfect. Like you'll never find the perfect property manager. You'll never find the perfect employee. Like you have to deal with people. And the hard part about business is typically not business. Pretty soon you'll figure out business. The hard part is managing the people that run your business. And that's where you really learn to be a leader and cast a vision and make sure that you attract the best people possible and then pay them appropriately.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important thing here, right? Because I think some people want to get into business to not do it. That's why you saw the rise of some of those, whether, remember drop shipping was popular a few years ago, or like running Amazon businesses where it's like, literally, you just want to be the first one that gets sold there. So you never have to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, well, that's kind of good, but that's not really a brand that no one knows about. Right. It's like, if I go to Amazon, I don't even know, aside from the brand I'm buying from Amazon. I'm not buying from John Smith Incorporated. I have no clue who they are.
Loyalty to the actual business behind that's actually offering the business, the product.
Absolutely. So, okay. So what are your plans for the next 5 years in terms of expansion? Because you said you have 40 units here and then you have some commercials in Texas. Like how big are you looking to get?
Yeah, I still look for deals, but I have a very specific niche. So I've learned very quickly what my strengths are, and my strengths are not in being the operator of a business. Like I do so much better being the person that negotiates the deal, works on the contracts, and make sure the paperwork is right, make sure the K-1s are out, the tax documents are out. And that's my strength. My strength is not in making sure that we have the right turnover process for our rentals. Or I am not an operational specialist. That's not my personality. So I've leaned into my strength. And so what I do is I go and help other existing sponsors who are world-class, and I partner with them and say, hey, I'll do business with you, but I'll help find a deal perhaps, but I want you to manage the deal. I want you to own the deal, and I'll be your partner. And I'll make sure the financing is in place. I'll structure it. I'll still be a part of the team and, help out where I can, but I'm not going to be the guy running down to Houston to make sure that the leasing process is perfect. That's not my strength. So I've personally decided to lean into the aspect of business where I'm basically more of what they call an asset manager. I have an ownership interest in these assets, and I manage a portfolio that has project managers and property managers that handle everything.
Well, that's a very interesting concept, right? Because I think for a lot of people, they think, they want to come up with a better process, and maybe some of the, the contractual pieces, the financing pieces, or all those, some of the, like you said, some of the devil's in the details. They want to say, well, that's the first thing I'm going to outsource to somebody, so I can just, come up with a brilliant process so I can do this from a couch, sipping on a pina colada or something like that.
Right.
So yours is a little bit different, which is actually like you know what you're good at, and I think that's what any person who's going to be starting their own company, whatever business, it doesn't have to be real estate. Really lean into your strengths.
Yeah.
Really. Like if you're like Paul, like himself, like you like the details like that, then make sure you work with someone else that maybe has a better process, has an operational model that you can leverage that balance you out. So you're not just doing that, especially if you don't like it. Right. So interesting. So you're looking to get bigger, and that's really cool here. So what about the social media piece? So how do you find your deals? And how do you market your brand out there as well so people know you, like you, and trust you?
Good question. So I do have a couple of people that work with me that are, one person is a VA in the Philippines, and she pretty much does all my promotion online. Like I don't do anything with social media really, even though I'm present on social media. I don't personally enjoy being a consumer of social media, so I don't interact on social media very well. Maybe I'm showing my age, but I never got hooked by it. But it's an important outlet in today's modern world. So for me, I decided to outsource that to somebody who's very good at it. And so she creates a list of ideas. I do some recordings, and then she takes the recordings and does everything. Like I'm just not involved anymore.
No, same here. Like when I have for my podcast, all the social stuff that goes out, that I've outsourced that because I'm not good at it. And two, I have no idea how many hashtags I'm supposed to use. And I'm like, no clue. Just
no clue.
Me, this is the fun part for this is what I enjoy about my business.
Same.
Talking to people. So interesting. So what is it about? So we're going to tip from the industry right now. So what is your opinion on the current real estate investment industry and where do you think it's going?
So I don't know the Canadian market, but I think there's a lot of parallels. I know the U.S. market, and the U.S. market is in an interesting place in that there is a huge shortage of places for people to live. Our population continues to grow. Most of it, we do have natural growth via our birth rate, but not a lot. But most of our growth comes from immigration. But net result is that our company or our country is continuing to grow. And it has despite every effort of the Fed, the market has continued to perform well. And the real estate market is it's really, when you think about it, this very fundamental economics. There are more people and less spots to live. Therefore, the value of each spot is more valuable. So that I don't see any trend in the next 10 and 20 years that changes that. We've been behind on our building scale for a very long time. Housing affordability is a huge problem. And as somebody who's in the business who provides those units, it makes me very, very bullish on that product, right? It's like there's a high demand, fundamental need that everybody needs, that everybody has. And people are willing to pay their biggest payment is to where they live. And will do whatever they can to have a place to live somehow, some way in almost every case. So I want to be a part of providing that product wherever I can. And I can get financing to do so in a lot of different ways in the U.S. So I'm very bullish on that, in that I'm betting on the U.S. economy that it will continue to grow. And if it doesn't, we're all messed up. Worldwide, we're all messed up, right? And so maybe this grand experiment falls apart on us in our lifetimes. I'm not really sure. But for the rest of my professional career, I see all the indicators pointing to the fact that if our political stability can remain in place, our economy will continue to grow.
Exactly. Like we're not going to get into politics on this show. I think I had one guest who I had. She was the mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania. So the first question I asked her was, Mayor, President Biden and President Trump, what do you know? And of course, she laughed about that. So, because I'll make this really quick. I actually got an email from someone, like another PR firm, where they said, "Hey, I work for the office of the mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania." At first, I thought, "Cool, okay," but it's about small businesses. At the time, I was marketing this as a small business in Canada. They're like, "Yeah, she worked in the Obama administration. She's a magna cum laude," and I'm like, "What does she want to talk to me about?" Mm-hmm. And it was a fun podcast, where she talked about different programs that are running in Scranton, Pennsylvania to try to get people to come to invest in Scranton, Pennsylvania and stuff like that. So it's really cool for that. So where can people reach out to you, Paul, whether it's to pick your brain or want to work with you? How do they contact you?
The best place to find me is on my website, pauldavidthompson.com. I have the curse of a common name, so I use all three of them. And I'm at the same name on most anywhere on social media, Paul David Thompson.
Perfect. And all right, Paul, thank you for being on the podcast. It was awesome.
Yeah, great job. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you, do you need a voiceover? Well, look no farther. Northway Capital Group has your answer. Commercials and explainer videos, AVR and voicemail, health and wellness, corporate training and e-learning, announcements, documentaries, and biography. Contact us on social media or email us at northwaycapitalgroup@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to the SME Stories podcast, which is owned by Northway Capital Group. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Northway Capital Group.